Alright, well the card for this one says dead meter, probable broken transfer shaft to shutter. Now, the advanced lever doesn't drop back to the body properly, but you can hear some action. You can see the capping plate comes down and latches into position. You can see it flips up. Sounds okay, but the shutter's not firing. We know someone's been in here. There's a screw missing from the base here, and that does not drop back into position correctly. It's probably missing its spring as well. It sounds like someone's been into the base of this camera. The Leatherettes have been off and they've been glued back on, and they are exceptionally ugly the way that's been done. Now there's a spring in here that goes in under the base plate, and its job is to keep the capping plate, latch the capping plate in position. Now if it's not present, the capping plate won't latch down, or it'll only latch down in some circumstances. So that's a possibility, but this business, that lever not dropping back to the correct position, that's unusual. And it's certainly, I think we should inspect the mechanism here and find out what's going on. Now obviously I've been into this before, and I'm probably not the first person to be into this, looking to see what was wrong with it. So let's investigate. We can get an idea as to whether the shutter's being cocked. It's certainly not being cocked, but we can get an idea as to whether the front part of the cam, like the front part of the transfer shaft that transmits the action from the film advance right through to the shutter, is present. Let's take that off. It is very dirty and gritty in here. I want to remove the prism so I can see what's happening. On a Retina Reflex 3 or 4, you must remove the meter before lifting the prism, otherwise you will break the needle on the end of the meter. And on the 3 you have to remove this screw entirely. On the 4, you can just slacken the screw off and lift the meter out. Set to shake that screw loose because it was busy trying to fall in places we don't want it. One screw just went west there. I'll find that in a second. I'll lift this meter out, and when you lift the meter, lift it up at this end, slide it away so that you don't damage the needle. Put that down carefully over there, and I'm going to remove the prism, the 3 larger black screws. We'll just check I think the front rings have been off this shutter, just guessing. Looking at the position of the cord on the drum here for the meter. Okay, of course we've got no screw here on that in there, and if we were to crank the film advance like that, the rack would take the opportunity to cause us grief. So I'll just pop a screw back in there. I might need to put a shorter one in there if that runs right through to the rack. That looks okay. So I'm going to move the film advance and we'll see what's happening in here. Well, obviously this part of the transfer shaft is working normally, and it is moving the front part of that rack. The shutter looks to me like it's partly cocked. And the mirror is certainly latching down into position. Just removing a bit of rubbish from in there. It's got a piece of metal. It almost looks like a tooth off one of the racks, off one of the shafts. I'm going to loosen these two screws. I think that the timing here of that is wrong. I think that's wrong by a tooth or so. Which, if somebody had had the meter out and they've moved the film advance, that would certainly do that. Just take that hold down bracket off there. That's job is to keep the rack in firm contact with the shaft below it. I'll just lift that, loosen that screw so that the rack can lift. Oh, don't want it loose completely though. We'll end up in trouble. Okay, let's just lift this rack up. Oh yeah, that dropped back. I'm going to put that rack back, that bracket back in place now in that position. The film advance lever is back against the body where it should be. And we'll see if we get a change in performance. Film advance is not moving at all. Oh, now it is. It's not returning to the rest position at all. I think there's a damaged tooth on that transfer shaft. It's very stiff in its action. And you can see it's not opening the shutter blades. So it's just not cocking that shutter at all. So the teeth on this front shaft here are probably broken. Well, that's fairly fatal. We do have the timing correct between this and the rear shaft, and that rear shaft appears to be intact. So that's a little bit of information. We know that there's no quick 5-minute fix for this one. It is going to have to come completely apart. But even that's good knowledge. And I'll just pop these screws back in place, put everything back where we found it. And the position of the shutter, we don't really know whether it's fully cocked or not. It doesn't appear to be cocked. It appears to me that it's not cocked, but it might be sitting in some rest state, partly cocked. Let's just move this to B and f1.9. I'm checking the position of this cam here, and that's all good. That was in the right position. It means our front rings are probably all correct. And the mirror and capping plate lock down and release when they feel like it, fairly reliably. So I'll remove this screw again, put my meter back in place. When you have this screw removed, never ever move the film advance, because you will end up with the rack jumping a tooth and then you're in trouble. I'm just going to get this meter set to the correct position, which we start here, ASA 10. And this should be rotated so that you can see the half moon shape through that little opening. Like that. And with this set to B and f1.9, we should be good. That's if the meter's working correctly. In this case, of course, the meter is actually dead. So I'm just going through the motions of making sure that I do things appropriately. I'll get this screw down in position. That one's always awkward. But that screw goes through the meter bracket and through that hold down bracket for the rack. So it's most important. Right, I'll find that screw that I dropped and finish this off. Okay, so rather than starting with a camera that just needs to be serviced because everything's just a bit oily and dirty, sticky, but is otherwise unbroken, let's do one here that's actually broken. This one is just not going to go. You already had a look at this one before, I think. It says dead meter, probable broken transfer shaft to the shutter. Let's start taking it apart. I'll start with the top cover. Something through the fork of the rewind, just spin the knob off. 2 screws at this end of the top cover, they're chrome plated brass. Take care not to slip and mar the screw or the top cover. 1 screw at the end of the top cover here. Now probably none of these screws will be tight because this camera has probably been checked over, and in fact they're not tight. I was able to get that little button unscrewed at the back there without a fight. This one here on the top, top cover off. That piece around the meter dial always falls off. Okay, so first I want to remove the meter. 2 screws, one here, one here at the front corner. They're little wee short ones. Now we have one tucked in down here, right next to the meter needle, so you need to be cautious about that one. Don't slip with your screwdriver and make a mess of the meter needle. Lifting the meter out, lift it up the outside edge, lift it up back towards the end of the camera and out, so that you don't catch that needle on anything. Put the meter carefully aside. Let's get rid of this annoying piece of string. Remove the prism. There are 3 large screws hold the prism down. We'll remove the prism assembly complete. Three screws, all the same length. Lift the prism away, put it somewhere safe. The surface here it's just plastic. It's very susceptible to scratches, and you will see them. Okay, we'll just continue stripping the camera down, I think. I'll remove the 2 screws from the strap lug at the end of the camera and lift that away. Let's take off the rewind shaft, just 2 screws. You can take this stud off, that supports the top cover. At the base of the camera, the back catch cover, 2 screws. They are chrome brass, they scratch easily, and they're small. Take the cover off. Now we have our spring there. Don't lose that little spring. Put that carefully aside. The advance lever. We need the leatherette patch off the advance lever. I'll use a scalpel to get underneath the edge of that. I'm working the scalpel around the outside edge of that leatherette patch. The adhesive's a little bit gooey, a bit rubbery. It's not a brittle adhesive. This is typically it's a later adhesive than the type used on the earlier retinas. course this camera's been serviced before and anything's a possibility in what they could have used to stick this down. So I'm working at this gently with my scalpel underneath, being careful not to slip and cut through the leatherette. Generally with leatherettes you are more using your scalpel to lever the leatherette up. In this case I'm using the scalpel more to cut through the adhesive layer beneath the leatherette. You can see there the adhesive is sort of just peeled up. So 3 screws on the advanced lever. We can lift the advanced lever off. Leaves us with the leatherette on the base to deal with. Using the scalpel again, I'll see how that goes. That peeled up easily at that point. The adhesive's a bit rubbery feeling. It's quite well stuck. I'll put a drop of naphtha under there. That'll probably soften that adhesive and that'll probably lift off quite easily. Now naphtha works quite well for this, and typically it doesn't damage these leatherettes. I say typically because it depends on what the naphtha you've got actually is and what state the leatherettes are in. And that's certainly coming away quite well. Just put a few drops under there. Don't be in a mad rush to get the leatherettes off. Don't just grab them and try and rip them loose, because that way lies madness and death. And this is not one of the world's prettiest pieces of leatherette, but by the time it's cleaned up and put back, it'll look fine. Whoever put these leatherettes in place was very, very generous with the adhesive. And they may have really slopped it on. Okay, there's our leatherette off in one piece, unharmed. So the chrome trim from the base of the camera. You can possibly see a smear of adhesive on the chrome trim there, and here, that's not run there from me using the solvent at the moment. That's adhesive that was spread onto the metalwork whenever this leatherette had been put back in the past, and whoever had done it just wasn't tidy about cleaning up. Lift the plate off carefully. Now there should be a spring in here. And it's not there. So that means that the capping plate would not work correctly because its return spring is missing. Now that has obviously been missing ever since whoever put this base plate back on the camera did so. So that's interesting. It means that the capping plate wouldn't have worked correctly. Alright, I'm going to remove the frame counter next. I'm going to unhook its spring, which immediately shot onto the table, and lift out the frame counter attachment. This is the lock that locks the film advance at the end of the film. That has its return spring, a little wee fine one. And this piece here, this of course isn't going to be moving at the moment, this piece here is what actually lets the lock drop in. As the counter reaches number 1, this shifts inwards and that allows the lock to drop down, and it locks into the film advance shaft at this point. Alright, so that's enough off the base for the moment. Let's turn our attention to the front of the camera. Now you'll see that the leatherette patch is missing from this corner. Now that's a sign that whoever was doing the repair previously didn't know what they were about. There's not much reason to remove those usually. I'm going to take the single screw out of the shutter release button here. The shutter release button here is missing its little leatherette patch, which would normally have to be taken off. Now I'm going to remove the leatherettes from the front of the camera. Now depending on how well they're stuck, these will peel back very easily. These appear to be stuck quite well. So I'm certainly able to get my scalpel under the edge of that. I'm going to pour a little bit of naphtha onto my scalpel blade, which will make it easier to get it underneath that adhesive. This will be stuck down with the same sort of adhesive that's been used on the base of the camera most likely. Of course, it's always possible that this camera has had multiple repairs from multiple people and that there's different adhesive on here. Don't go mad running naphtha onto things either, it'll end up running places you don't want it to run. The leatherettes here are a little bit stiff. They vary a lot. Often on the Reflex 3 the leatherettes are quite flexible, and it'll just be a reflection of the materials that they were using at the time. whatever particular plastic it was that formed the leatherette. This is very well stuck around here. Unusually so. Just looking for a different pair of tweezers. Ones that aren't as sharp as the ones I'm currently using. Okay, I'll keep working away at this. Yeah, that adhesive is unusually tenacious. Of course, there may be multiple lots of adhesive here, and whatever's been used is not... I'm getting crumbly stuff out from under there, so there's something that goes hard has been used. So what I'm striking is going to depend a lot on how well the metal was cleaned prior to the last time someone glued stuff back. If it had just been this sort of adhesive as I struck on the base plate, this would be coming off much easier. The naphtha would be softening it, and the adhesive would be letting go. But it's I think something else has been used in here. Sometimes you'll find these cameras where the leatherette's only been peeled back as far as here to allow the person to lift the front plate off. Don't do that. You always end up with a huge crease across the leatherette where it was folded back. Always make a point of getting the leatherette off complete. I'm going to see if I can peek under there and see what I think's been used. I can't tell, it's something that's gone hard and dry looking. Normally the leatherette just peels off quite easily on these cameras. So I am having to force my scalpel down hard against the aluminium body to keep it underneath the leatherette so it doesn't slip and cut through the leatherette as I try and cut through this glue layer. It might be very hard to get the leatherette off at that corner. Yeah, it's certainly come off quite in flakes there, so it's something different in the way of adhesive. Be careful lifting the leatherette up over that release. Okay, that just suddenly moved quite easily there. Now the leatherette here has got some cracks in it. It may well be that the previous repairer didn't peel the leatherette right all the way back. They might have only gone to the corner. I'm working in from the hinge end now, and I'm just levering this leatherette up here. That's free. So it's quite brittle. I don't quite know what to make of that. Now I have to deal with the one on the other side. Well, this is much, you can hear that crackling as because it's quite brittle as it cracks away. Let's see if we can get in from the catch end. No, it's pretty well stuck. I think I'll have to remove the chrome trim from the top so I can get at that underneath that edge easier. Alright, so what I need to do here is just remove my strap plug here, these two screws, and this hold down on the back here. I'll remove this hold down, the strap plug, don't lose that little round spacer, it's quite important. This will allow me to get this chrome trim off the top, which will allow me to get down under this edge of the leatherette here. The leatherette certainly looked funny there. I don't know whether it's what I suspect is that there's some coating on the top of that leatherette which is cracking. We'll find out when I clean them up to put them back on the camera. Once I'm done. This repair is interesting because we know that someone's been in the camera in the past, and we know that it's been repaired before. Somebody's gone to quite a great length to repair it. But we know that things have been done wrong because it was missing the spring for the capping plate. So I know that would not have worked properly. So knowing that someone's been in here repairing this, and knowing that that probably wasn't a successful repair, we can find just about anything in here, and some of the faults will be introduced faults, if you like. They're not what the camera suffered from in the natural course of decay and old age. There'll be faults that have been introduced as someone neglects to put a part back, or puts a part back wrong, or breaks or bends something that would normally never happen by itself. And any time you strike a camera, a broken camera needing repair, you always stand a better chance of being able to repair it if you're the first one on the scene. If somebody's already had a go, you can just about guarantee that there are new problems, quite apart from whatever it was that caused the camera to be retired in the first place. And as I said before, this comes out of my box of parts cameras, and the parts cameras probably came to me as parts cameras. They may have passed through multiple hands as parts cameras. They may have had good bits robbed out of them. We know this one had a dud meter. We don't know about the state of the prism because the shutter does not function, so you couldn't see through it. But people will steal meters and prisms from parts cameras, and if they're tidy, they'll put all the bad bits together into one camera, and without any nefarious purpose. But at a later date, that pile of useless parts might end up back on the market, so to speak. Okay, so we've got the leatherette off the front. We can remove the front of the camera. I'm going to remove the front rings from the shutter first. 3 screws. I'll remove this little pinion here, just take that off its shaft, and this one here is on a small shaft. I'll remove that too. That couples through to the meter drum, which couples through to this. So 4 screws hold the front of the camera in place, and under the 4 screws there should be 3 saucer shaped washers. Which effectively act like spring spacers. They're used so that you can adjust the depth from the lens mount through to the film plane. Okay, so that's all out. Let's lift the front cover off, get up and away. There's our front cover off. There's one of our washers. I'm counting them, see what we've got. 4. It looks like we've got a full complement here. Which is very good. Okay, so we know that this didn't work. Let's have a look. Now, I suspected that the teeth were going off the front wheel here, the front cam, and they have. It's completely missing a whole batch of teeth. So that was the problem there. I'll just latch down that capping plate. Latch down the mirror. I'm looking at the mirror. It's very dirty. It's quite smeary too. I suspect it might have had a finger on it or two, and someone's wiped at it. Let's take out the cam. Now, there's 2 of them there. 2 little pieces of metal. Now those pieces of metal would be teeth off this little pinion. It's missing teeth from about 180 degrees of the surface there. Oh, there's a little spring here on the this action, and it's doing its best to get away. I'm just trying to get it seated. That's better. I'll remove that later. I'll show you all about it, but it's very good at getting away. Okay, so that's that body stripped down. I'm just checking the action of the levers. They seem to move up and down okay. Mirror release is okay. So the body itself doesn't look too bad there. You know, it looks like it would work. We know that this is completely messed up. Here's another one of the teeth. So I think that's 4 of the teeth I've spotted so far. And these are very small things, you know. You've got to have your eye open to catch things like that. But even if it was only 1 tooth missing, this was never going to work. Right, so what we know is this was rotating correctly, where it couples to the cocking rack arrangement. And at the front, this transfer shaft would couple to this, and this piece would couple to the shutter. What we don't know is whether there's a problem with the shutter itself. So I'll find a tool like this in my parts in my toolbox, and we'll cock the shutter manually from here and see if it actually cocks.